give a yellow but I think you might want to give it a couple minutes before we get in.
Well, yeah, but I'll just.
He'll give you yellow when he gives you green. Would you please ask one so I can say it?
Good evening. We're not quite ready to start up yet, but we are live streaming, so I wanted to speak, and Jeremy wanted to make sure that we were communicating. It looks like we are, so just give us a few minutes while we get the count in to make sure we have the quorum. Our parliamentarian will be working on that. And Mark, when you think you have 100, let me know. Okay? Lovely snacks for your enjoyment while you wait. You can go to the concession stand.
Oh, I forgot mine. Is that yours? No. It's yours. This is a good spot. I mean, right as a lecture, like, no, I can't put my computer here, so I think like it's probably like a third of the people don't even know I'm there. Yeah. But I want to see those coloring sheets.
Okay. Yeah, we are. We're ready to go. So do your thing.
Okay.
Not your invocation, but just the
Coloring sheets.
color sheet.
There are coloring sheets for anybody who wants to color. I made copies of brand new ones. You've never seen these coloring sheets before. They're really cool, and Anne put out fresh crayons. They're right across from the snacks. If you need one, get one.
She's very proud of those coloring sheets. All right. I think we are ready. There's my parliamentarian. Actually, let's start it with our invocation.
Yeah, let's pray.
Okay.
Yeah, let's pray. What do you say? Let's ask God to be with us in this momentous and holy time, on this cold night. Will you pray with me, please? God, we thank you for gathering us here tonight. We ask that you would draw near to us in our time of discernment, that you would give us ears to hear your guiding word and courage to ask the questions that bring clarity and the wisdom to know the truth when it's spoken. God, help us know the strength which comes to all those who answer your call. God of love, we thank you for the generations of faithful people who've taken their turn leading this congregation, always seeking to follow your will. Help us step forward in faith, trusting that you go before us in this generation as you did in theirs. May grace abound among us, and may love have the final word in us and through us. We pray all these things in the strength of your Spirit, O God, and in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, Scott, your meeting.
Thank you, Valerie. Welcome. I am Scott Morgan. I am moderator, and I will be trying to run this thing tonight. The first order of business will be to turn to my parliamentarian, Mark Simpson, to see if we have a quorum. Mark, do we have 100 people or more? Mark says that we do have a quorum. Thank you. That is phenomenal. I really appreciate it. Congregationalists never cease to amaze me, so thank you all for coming out. The next item is to approve the agenda. You've been handed a copy of it. If the slide lady would move forward to, to the first part of it. It will be up on this thing, but it's divided into several sections, but you've got the full one in front of you. The agenda is just what we will be doing, nothing on there. Even though it's got a proposed motion, you won't be voted. That doesn't include the motion. That would have to be made separately. This is just the agenda by which we will run this. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as printed? Well done, Beth. Is there a second? Yeah, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We have an agenda. My job is at this point, and then to give way to others with more expertise, is to explain a little bit of what we're going to do tonight. The first thing I want to do is introduce the people that we have up here. We'll just go in order. We have Doug Eason, who has been chair of our Stewardship Facilities Committee for a number of years and has been active in a lot of the projects that we're doing. We have Devin Kim, who is the immediate past moderator, and in some ways, more importantly for tonight, was chair of the Facilities Task Force that worked many years on getting us to this point. We have Donnie Mooberry, our treasurer, who is always guiding us through the many pitfalls that we create. We have Kim, everyone knows Kim, our grand and glorious organist. We have Johanna Cox, who has been chair of the organ committee. I don't know, was Richard Cordley pastor? Yeah. It's been a long, long time, at least 10 years. We have Sonia Jordan, who will be the moderator in 24 days, not that I'm counting, and we're very excited about that. And then we have Debbie Schmidt, who is chair of the Stewardship Board, which has been overseeing the facilities and many of the things that we've been doing trying to get to this point. Thank you all for everything you've done. Thank you to all the people who these people represent, because for everything that they've done, there have been committees, boards, and task force that many of you were on, and I really appreciate the effort. The only way Congregationalism works is when people step up and take their turn. So thank you to everybody that did this. One point before I go through the agenda that I want to really clarify, because there have been a lot of good questions. One in particular that comes up is that this is a little bit different than or seems different than a lot of capital campaigns that you might have experienced through a university or through other nonprofits. And the reason is this is different. This is a congregational campaign, capital campaign. In a typical organization, an individual, the chief executive or the governing board would make the decision, we need a capital campaign for whatever it is. And before they went public with a capital campaign, they would typically hire a consultant, unless they were a larger group and had it in-house, to help them with the fundraising drive. They would put together chairs of the committee. They would put together the committee. The architects would go forward and get much of the detail that you want down beyond just broad estimates based on square footage, and a little bit more than that. They would get into how many doorknobs and all the details that will get you what you really need to know. You would also start, after you had that information, start meeting with lead gift givers so that they would have the information they need to help you with those larger gifts all gifts are important, but it's also nice to have the larger gifts that make certain things possible. All that would have already happened before you would have been introduced to a capital campaign. This one, you're at the authorization stage because you are a Congregationalist. You are the governing entity of this church. The council, the governing body, wisely and without any real debate, just said, no, this is one of those decisions that the congregation needs to make. So you're at the authorization level, and then you will come back and you will be at the appropriation level, go back to my legislative days, where you would then decide if you want to fund it. And that would be with a lot more detail, a lot more information. You still need to ask those questions, but just understand where you are. You are the board deciding, are we ready to take the next step, spend a little bit of money to get organized and have the detail that people will need before they write checks. So just make that clarity why it feels a little different. Beyond that, just real quickly, I think the agenda is very detailed. It has things in our time periods in parentheses. That's a thing I like to do for agendas because it helps people have an idea of what's sort of expected. It always changes because certain items become longer and others are shorter. Those are just suggestions to see how we go through. Those all add up to about an hour, but those also include the expectation that you will ask questions. What we will do is go through, and if you have a specific question, it might be good to wait till you see on the agenda where that item would be covered, one, to see if it's going to be addressed, but two, you'd have the right person with a mic that could deal with it. So you can ask questions whenever you want to, but that's the idea, is that as we move forward and go through how we got here, what we're proposing, and how we're going to pay for it, you can ask at the right time. And then at the conclusion, we would go to just a general discussion, debate, whatever you want to call it. We do have a goal, that's all it is, of going to a vote by 6:45, because we do have a choir practice at 7, and I fear for our quorum if we go beyond that. But if we need to, we can come back at another time to finish the vote. But that's the goal, that's the target. So with that, let's get on with this meeting, and we'll start with how we got here. Devin, lead us away, but not astray.
Well, I have a long timeline that I've passed out to everyone, Scott, that will hopefully keep me from going astray. And I'm not going to go through that timeline with all of you word by word tonight. I don't believe you've ever had this document. That is the Facilities Master Plan 2018 to present. This is created by reviewing minutes, by being in meetings, by me going back through my calendar and making sure that I document everything that we've done up until this point. So again, I'm not going to review this 4-page document with you, but I am going to just point out some highlights in here so you get we're all on the same page as to exactly what got us here. So I start with 2018, but do understand that an organ committee had already been formed prior to 2018, and Johanna will get into that when we, I think, get into our next section on the agenda. But in 2018, funds were raised to install a hearing loop. And you all have heard me do the if you give a mouse a cookie metaphor when we talk about the installation of the hearing loop. If you haven't, it's printed for you, but essentially, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. And then when he drinks the milk, he's going to need to look in the mirror to make sure he doesn't have a milk mustache. And when he's looking in the mirror, he's going to realize he needs to borrow your scissors to, trim up his whiskers. And when he's trimming up his whiskers, he'll make a mess. And one thing will continue to lead to another. And that is essentially what happened with the hearing loop. In order to install the hearing loop, we would have to pull up the carpet. By pulling up the carpet, we would ruin the carpet. We would need to install new carpet. If we were going to install new carpet, we would need to understand how it would be installed around the organ. The organ, as I previously said, already had a committee trying to understand the best way to move forward with repairing the organ. And would the carpet fit what was going to be repaired or not? We did not know. If we were going to talk about where the organ was going to go, we needed to consider bringing the choir loft down to make it more accessible, because that would maybe be where the organ would go. So it's very similar to the if you give a mouse a cookie story when it comes to the hearing loop. One project became another project, and all of a sudden we were well beyond our hearing loop budget. So as a result of that and some other, interesting history of items being sold from the Mayflower Room and needing to replace them and thinking about the aesthetics of the building, a committee was formed to consider really the overall needs for the building and thinking about a coordinated approach. So the committee worked to identify a vendor, Clark Huseman, that would help the church create an overall plan, and that happened in March of 2020. March 12th is actually when the committee recommended Clark Huseman. The next day, the NCAA canceled the national championship basketball tournament, and we went into what I'll call COVID times. That's the date that I always remember. So much work on this project happened during COVID. And I think that's why anytime I stand up in front of you and talk about it, I like to remind you that this is when we were online. This is when every meeting happened via Zoom. And you got lots of emails, and you received lots of information, and you probably didn't always take it all in, because we were all living a very different life during that period of time. So in March, the committee recommended Clark Huseman. In June, the council approved contracting with Clark Huseman to come up with a facilities master plan. And then in July into August of 2020, the steering committee for the facilities master plan was formed. And that group is listed in your document. I won't read everyone's name, but please know, if you are on that committee, you attended 11 meetings over the next 2 years. And you worked incredibly hard with Clark Huseman to understand the one-on-one interviews that were done throughout the congregation, the all-congregation survey that went out, and the results that we considered. We published updates to the congregation in the Rock, as well as in, I believe, Friday emails. And we provided an in-person update to the congregation in February of 22, as well as a final presentation of the facilities master plan to the congregation in August of 22. So we started in August of 2020 to really understand and create a well-thought-out roadmap for long-term and incremental improvements to the church that gave us a vision that enabled the church to function well, and one that expresses who the church is today. And finally, giving us ideas for unifying the 3 buildings through updated interior finishes. So we presented that to the congregation in August of 22, and then that plan was applied to council's goals later on in 22, and that goal then became a set of strategies in the spring of 23. And in those strategies, we identified a phase 1 and a phase 2 of the project. The phase 1 was already underway. You've seen the new paint. You've seen the work that's being done, the solar panels that have been approved for installation.
Not yet. We're working on it.
You don't see them yet?
No, we haven't got approval yet. That's another project.
Oh, okay.
We're working on it, though.
But the church has approved the.
church is behind
Yes,
it,
yeah. I'm not going to speak for the city tonight.
I wish you would. It'd make my life a hell of a lot easier.
I can pretend. So you've seen phase 1 happening. Phase 2 was what I'll cover in the next section. What are we actually talking about here? And you've seen some pictures in the slides leading up to this. So phase 2 included finding a consultant to do a feasibility study for a capital campaign. Essentially, should we even try to raise money to do this work? And the council started working on that over the summer in 2023, and in August approved to sign a short-term contract with Generis consulting firm to come in and do interviews. Many of you sat with Generis over 3 different meetings in September of 23, where we talked about what we love about the church. We talked about things that we thought could be improved with the church. So that happened in September of 23. Generis said, you can do this, Plymouth Church. And council has been considering and talking to the congregation about whether or not we should take on this capital campaign. And as a result of continuing to put numbers together, we now have numbers that we believe are lockstep with what the church is capable of raising. So that's why we're here tonight. So that was a whirlwind tour over the last 5+ years of facilities master planning, which then leads to what is part of phase 2. Now, I think I'd be remiss to talk about the facilities master plan without saying, we're talking about phase 1, we're talking about phase 2. There were actually further plans that were developed as part of the facilities master plan. Phase 3, we talk about things on the south side of the church. None of that is being considered for the capital campaign that we're talking about tonight. And now I'm officially going to move to the next item on the agenda, which is talking about what is being proposed. And even though Doug's name is there, he's given me permission to go straight into telling you about the sanctuary. So, when we talk about what is being proposed in the sanctuary, we are talking about, and Kathleen, is it possible to get a picture just so we're all looking at what I'm talking about? Thank you so much. So we're talking about lowering the choir loft, and if anyone wants to come up and look closer at this, it isn't as big maybe for the folks in back, so please feel free to come on up. Lowering the choir loft and installing an organ that is new, I think, but I'm going to let Johanna handle that. The organ section is not mine. But in this picture, I think it's a new organ. That's the story I tell Kim. The lowering the choir loft, organ is lowered, obviously, there in front. The choir loft is now expanded for more members and accessibility. The chancel footprint is completely kind of spread out across this entire width of the sanctuary. There are 3 steps coming up to the chancel, but ramps on both sides. I think it's interesting that one of the most important parts when we talk about the sanctuary, Susan McCarthy, I'm looking at you, is that we keep the historic look and feel of the sanctuary. So even though there are no longer stairs in this proposed model going up to a choir loft, it still looks like they're there. So that image that you see is the bulk of what you can see with phase 2. There's also the addressing of the HVAC issues that, as I understand it, it's loud, doesn't necessarily, right, Doug, it's loud?
Yeah, and if you lower the choir loft, we're going to have
Well,
to
if we lower the choir loft, it gets in the way of where the HVAC is anyway. So we'll be able to fix the HVAC issue, and the hearing loop will be able to be put in. We've gone beyond that. It's printed in like many of our documents.
We have a solution we're working on.
Okay.
Accessibility.
Okay, great. And we'll be addressing the flooring needs and refurbishing and preserving the stained glass. So that's the phase 2 sanctuary. And now I will invite Johanna Cox up to talk about what does the organ mean?
Well, good evening, and I'll start by saying thank you so much for being here in this space tonight to listen and ponder and hopefully decide. The organ committee was formed in 2009, and I joined in 2012. Kim joined us in 2007, and it was pretty obvious as our organ is aging, and he knew it was, and we needed to start making a plan, and it's such a major investment, as you know. We always had Reuter on our back because this is a Reuter organ, and until last year when Reuter closed down. When I joined in 2012, we did a lot of exploring and visited different sanctuary spaces, different churches, different organs, and especially important, different acoustical format for organs. And it was just fascinating because every place sounds a little different and every organ responded a little differently. And it's really hard to make a major decision like that when there are so many options out there. We did have Quimby organ out of Warrensburg, Missouri, come in November. Was it November? Okay, or early December, I cannot remember, to analyze this organ and give us some options. All right, and so option one, if I can find my notes here, I should have it. Is a tonal rebuild for $1,500,000. Option two is all of option one plus a whole bunch of other things for $1,900,000. And option three, of course, is a new organ for $2,301,000-ish. And so that was good to just have some figures flashing in front of us. This organ is old and getting older by the second. Our master music minister has had to deal with things that doesn't even appear obvious to the congregation because he knows and he doesn't fix, but I mean, he makes things work, and it's so frustrating. I'm not sure what kind of magic you have, but it's amazing. It really is. So, but I really want to speak from the heart tonight. And so I started analyzing pipe organs versus electronic organs versus no organ at all. And in a sanctuary space as historic as this church is and as beautiful as this space is, it just feels imperative that we have a pipe organ. And so here we go. The organ provides a way to minister to people who come from various backgrounds. By tradition, the pipes are often symbol for the voice of God. With its wide dynamic range and spectrum of colors, the organ is reflective of many ways that God speaks to us. Its majesty can remind us of God's thunder, and its quietness of God's still small voice. The organ, the pipe organ, is relevant in that it is different from sounds that people hear in our secular, media-dominated world. One of the primary benefits of using a pipe organ in worship is the dynamic range and color that one can get out of that instrument, from the softest whispers to the grandest fortes. The organ is the only instrument that is capable of producing the sheer scale of volume needed not only to lead a congregation in singing, but also to provide accompaniment to a choir or soloist, and then to stand alone and perform its own solo repertoire. That is all I'm going to say tonight. Thank you very much again for being here.
Now we start talking about money. So you have printed at the bottom of the agenda a rough estimate. We worked with Clark Huseman, who basically has a modeling program where you put the square footage in, and you say you're going to replace trim, or you're going to replace paneling or carpet, and they're able to just be able to put in an average estimate. So as you look at the expenses that we're talking about, recognize that they are a high-level estimate. We have not picked a color, we haven't picked materials. That will be done if the capital campaign is approved, and we'll be able to tighten up the expenses, but this is using average square footage, average expense. So as you heard Joanna talk about, did you say really that they're looking at that middle estimate of refurbishment plus, and we just rounded up to the $2 million figure. The chancel and the adjustments to anything that we have to do with the HVAC and the air handling units, again, is really using that Clark-Huesman model, and that's the $1.8 million. We also are anticipating that, those are costs as of now, and we anticipate this project taking a little bit of time to get done, so they've added that 6% escalation or inflation rate. And then we recognize that we need to have monies available for contingencies, as you do in any construction project, especially of this size. And then we also know we'll have capital expense or expenses for interest while we incur a construction loan. And so that's really that fourth column, is trying to catch all those other costs that we know kind of at aggregate, again, best estimate. So that estimate comes in, at $4,499,788. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about how we pay for it, but essentially there's two major buckets that we look at it. One would be the capital campaign, and then tax credits and grants really give you that second bucket. So maybe I'll kind of shift into those. Really, the first thing would be the tax credits. So the state of Kansas has a program that if you're a historical building, you can apply, and 30% of, and their version of capital might be slightly different, but anything that's fixed, you can get a tax credit for. And as a nonprofit, would get state historical credits, and then we're able to go on the market and sell them. We have done that twice so far as a congregation, a number of years ago, 6 or 7, and then the great part is that Amanda J. helped remind us that this program existed, and we did that with the work that was done in 2023. So the masonry work that we did for whatever that was, 3 or 4 months, and some other work, some HVAC and some other pieces, we were actually able to get that credit in. And then the great news is that Jaron was able to get an application in right before the paint is starting. And so we've got an approval. They haven't obviously paid us till we submit our receipts, but we've already got approval for the paint, a replacement project that I'm going to try and get to council to approve in February for HVAC, and one other small project, guttering. So we've had 2 rounds of experience with the historic state, that committee. Again, 1 successful application within the last 18 months that's already been paid out, so we understand the whole process from applying through submitting documentation, which is not fun, but we can do it. And then we have another application that's been successfully approved. So I feel like we're set up for understanding the process. There are certain things that are not covered, like chairs, or if we were to put down carpet squares. Anything that's movable will not be part of that project. So again, it's 30% of what's allowable. So in my brain, I'm more like 25% of the total project might come back. But we'll work through them. I did send an inquiry. I know there was some concern about this project not allowing us to touch the historic sanctuary. My interpretation of the documentation reads that we would be allowed to make changes, especially if you think about the big thing that would be the ADA, and obviously, organs at some point are going to need to be refurbished or replaced. So I don't believe that's a concern. I sent them an email on Monday. I have not heard back, but we did have them tour the building 3 years ago, and I know we talked a little bit, a high level, that we were going to be making some changes to the sanctuary. And again, I believe that this will be eligible for us. I think the big thing, once we have the next phase, if this is approved, we can then get an application in and get a little bit better read, but we have to have a firmer plan before we bring them into that process. So again, 30% on 25 to 30% would be tax credits. And then we do have, I just looked it back up, there's about 68,000 in the organ fund between Sacred Place and another amount, which I think has been held by the Music and Fine Arts Board, which I believe would be available to us to tap for this project. We have an ongoing relationship with the Rice Foundation. I did a preemptive ask for solar panels, though it hasn't been totally approved yet. And they did give us $22,000 for that project, so I think they could be another funding source that we could talk to see what they'd be willing to support. So we have some estimates for that. So, and then, you know, maybe there's some opportunity to go find somebody that likes supporting church organs and wants to help us. I've not done that research yet, but there might be some availability in that space. So beyond the capital campaign, there are definitely ways to get some of this stuff funded for us. I think, Donnie, you want to talk about capital campaign?
No one can believe that I want to talk about money, but I do. So Music and Fine Arts was actually the first board I was on when I joined Plymouth, and I started on that board in 2011. Johanna was chair. And the first thing I heard about, of course, was the organ. And I've been hearing about the changes we need to make to the organ, hearing accessibility issues, choir loft accessibility issues for this chancel so that all of us can participate in meetings like this, so that we can all read scripture in service. And so I'm incredibly excited that all of that, I hope, is about to culminate in us turning the last key to finally furthering our vision through this project. And that key is funding. How are we going to fund this? The really good news is that there's biblical precedent for funding a capital project. So I know we're all thinking about King David and Solomon, and the Lord told King David that Solomon, it would be his job to build the temple, but David wanted to help. And so he made a generous lead gift, both from his position as king and from his personal wealth. He set the standards, and then the leaders of Israel responded, and they gave freely of their own gifts, and then the people rejoiced. You can read this in 1 Corinthians chapter 29, I'm not making it up. The people rejoiced at the response of their leaders, and the entire assembly gave of their own gifts. And that's exactly how our capital campaign is going to work. So we have already had people express interest in being lead givers. If we get the vote we're hoping for tonight, we will move ahead quickly to secure those lead gifts. When we have this kind of excitement in our congregation, I'm amazed at the number of people I've already heard from about giving to this campaign. Once we have those lead gifts, that will provide kind of the security and the support that individuals need to make major gifts, just like it did with the leaders of Israel. And then the leadership of those making those major gifts will encourage all of us to give as our situation allows. Just some technicalities. The capital campaign will have its own budget, and it will be separate from the mission spending plan. The expenses of the campaign will be paid by campaign donations, although we will front the initial consultant cost and some other upfront expenses from our operating reserve so that it's kind of a no-interest loan to ourselves so we can avoid incurring those interest costs up front. As is possible and likely with any capital campaign, some of our larger gifts are likely to be paid over 3 years, and any tax credits we receive won't be available until after the completion of the project. So we'll likely need a line of credit or a construction loan that we'll secure by pledges to allow for the completion of the project and the securing of the tax credit, and then the receipt of all the pledge income. And that cost has been factored into the campaign budget. I've been thinking about this project a lot, and I've been doing a fair amount of research and, surprisingly, some ciphering. And I keep reminding myself that it's really important to remember what Scott said, which is that a church capital campaign is different from a secular campaign in many ways. Scott already talked about some of those ways, but another way is that a capital campaign, well, it's a stewardship program. It's not sales. It's really spiritual in nature, and it's a form of significant engagement with the church's work and the church's future. And my goal in any work I do on the campaign is to help communicate the need that exists in our faith community and to explore how God will meet that need through the proper stewardship of time and talent and treasure. Church capital campaigns do have similarities to other non-secular campaigns that we're all familiar with, but another positive difference in a church capital campaign is the timeline. The church campaign, the phases of a campaign can go so much more quickly because the project itself and the administration of the campaign and us, the donor base, it's all streamlined. As I was thinking about this and doing the research and getting excited about the prospect of a campaign, I started thinking, of course, in my role as treasurer for 24 more days, that what would this do to our operating budget? And certainly that question was asked during last Sunday's budget meeting, and it's an appropriate question. I did a fair amount of research, and I was pleasantly reassured, because having done campaigns before in other organizations, that actually capital campaigns usually increase annual giving. And in fact, in churches, and I checked multiple sources, it can often be 10 to 15% of an increase that over a 3 to 5 year period a church will see in its operating budget, in addition to the capital gain contributions. I was really excited by that news, but as you all know, I'm conservative with a small c, and I want to have a backup plan, and I'm reassured that if there is a disruption in our pledge income during the capital campaign year, that we now have the operating reserve that we could take care of our needs during that time frame. And it's one of the reasons I feel so good about the timing of the campaign, is that we really have worked to secure monies beyond our operating reserve to provide for the mission and operation of our church. Does anybody have any questions? I know that was really quick, but I want to make sure I answer any questions anybody has about the capital campaign or my ciphering. I'm sorry, Pastor. Okay, great. Well, I'm looking forward to not a transactional campaign, but a transformational campaign. I'm really excited, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Donnie. Thank you, everybody. That was a great variety of how we got here, what we've been doing, and what we're proposing. I'm going to wrap it up. One of the questions that does come up is, what if we don't reach our goal? How would we prioritize? And I think part of that needs to be viewed as, our goal here isn't a particular dollar amount at this point. We've got a lot more calculating to do, a lot more estimating to do. They still want to talk to other organ companies to get more estimates in. But the point here is, the goal is this project. The goal is the organ. The goal is making this chancel accessible to everyone. This goal is to just fix this building that we have inherited. And it's just such a great reflection of how diverse our entire congregation is. Each of us have different interests. Each of us show our faith in different ways. And it's just so nice that this brings all of that together in the one place that we gather and we worship God. And so the goal is this project, not the dollar amount. We will make we can make that project fit whatever dollar amount we realize that we can raise. But it will be significant, but I think it is so doable, and I am so confident with this. If we don't agree to do this, that is clearly an option, but we will be back here in a year. Not me. I mean, I'll be here sitting out there, but there will be others here, because that organ is not going to fix itself. It has proven that. We've waited for that miracle. It just hasn't happened. And the accessibility will not be fixed on its own. We will have to do it, and it will be more expensive. We could have done it 5 years ago. We could have done it a long time ago. There's a lot of could-haves, but now is a moment that we are given, and I really hope that we can do this and move forward. You will still have, as always, the final say, because it has to be a successful campaign in terms of what people are willing to give. But I love the transformational, not transactional, and that is the nature of this thing. That is our presentation. And so now what I'd propose doing before we go to more questions or discussion is get a motion so that we would have what we all agree on what we are discussing, and we can make whatever changes. Devin?
Yep, I would.
Not that this has been seated or anything.
I would move that Plymouth Congregational Church approve a campaign to renovate the sanctuary, update the organ, HVAC, and other appropriate items. The cost currently estimated at about $4.5 million to be paid through a combination of a capital campaign, tax credits, and grants. No debt other than carrying costs shall be incurred unless approved by the congregation at a congregational meeting.
Is there a second? Was it who's? Oh, Dwight. Yeah. And also thank you to Larissa Artlong, our wonderful clerk who is keeping, or at least trying to keep, great minutes. So we have a motion and a second. And this is the point where we, until somebody calls the question, we will discuss, answer questions. We're here to do what the will of the congregation. And if, oh, yeah, and from a practical matter, we have mics for people to come up with, or, I don't know, Devin, do you want to? I can run it. Here. Yeah, Sonia. Yeah. So we have a question back here in the middle. Or comment, whatever it is.
I just have one quick question. The vote is strictly on the money issue. So the description of the sanctuary, will that be discussed in the future with discussion among the congregation members?
Yes. Well, it isn't strictly on the dollar amount. It's strictly on going forward with the campaign to do those things. These are concepts. They're renderings. There's a lot of, as the architect says, this is a matter of feet because everything has to fit. And so we have to have the specific organ that it will be put in, or the parts of the organ that will be put in, so that they will be able to know what goes where. And one of the big things that we're hoping for some savings is when the organ company that is picked and the architects can meet, then they can all work out an agreement and an understanding and make sure they're not both estimating the same expense for some of the physical changes that need to be made. So the actual ultimate design will be part of the capital campaign that we present when we go out to try to raise the money. Does that answer? I mean, everybody correct me if I'm off base there. But these are not final. That is a concept at this point. But the idea of lowering the chancel and making it accessible, fixing the organ, and lowering the choir loft, those concepts are what the program is. What it actually ends up looking like will depend on the specifics of what is agreed to. We have, yeah, go ahead.
Has this church had approved a capital campaign in the past? I don't recall any.
Last one was 20.
I remember debt.
The last one was 20 years ago
20 years ago.
that we had a capital campaign.
What for?
South building, yeah. South Church, after the fire, right? No. Yeah. None of us were here. No, I was here. I actually gave to it. I just don't remember what it was. I don't know what they did with it. What? Yeah, 55. No, it was.
We did have a campaign after the fire, but the 20th century was just to replace South Church.
It was to replace what had been replaced by so the 55 building that came in after the fire had lived its life, and we replaced that with the campaign from 20 years ago. So that building was built 20 years ago.
And was there a problem in?
The question was, have we had a capital campaign?
Have we had a capital campaign such as this one in past years? And if so, was it successful? Did we? Because I remember times when we had debt that we were paying off for several years.
we had one that ended in debt, and one before that where we did a lot on the north building and some on the sanctuary. I mean, we've had a number of them. I've only been here since '88, so I've been through 2 of them, but it's been a while. Some go better than others. That one did end with debt, and that was something that we worked our way through. That's why the motion doesn't allow for debt beyond the carrying cost unless the congregation votes to go to debt. And remember to try to speak it. Wait, hang on, people. We'll go over here, but you try to use the mics if you have anything, because we are streaming this to those who aren't able to make it. So which way? Okay, you'll go first.
All right.
I want to say your name first, too. Sorry.
Oh, my name is Mary Lake. I did give to the last capital campaign. I'm going to be a broken record. Please do not throw things at me. But I will tell you that with the 3 steps, many of us who sit in this congregation will not be able to see. We will not see the podiums. We will not see the children sing. We will not see the children's pageant. We will see the choir, and that's important to me, and the organ is of utmost importance to me. But so is my ability to be a part of the service. And we talk about hearing accessibility. Well, I know I'm abnormally short. Nobody has to tell me that. It's been my lifelong condition. But I will tell you, if you cannot see, you cannot be as actively involved in your church service. Now, I know I've said this before, and you can call me all manner of names. I don't really care. But I will tell you, with the 3 steps, we will not be able to see.
Yeah, my name is David Trevino. Actually, Mary stole a lot of my thunder there. I've had discussions with my wife. We are also tall, challenged people. And so my question was, again, if we vote to proceed with this, are we later going to have another session where we vote on the design? Because, again, lowering it, how much are you going to lower it? How high is it now, and what is it going to be lowered to? If it's going to be lowered to a certain amount, which is going to be prohibitive for Mary and other short people, are we going to redesign the floor so it lifts up as we go back, or are we going to be assigned seating from short to tall? So again, these are all just practical issues, again, that are very important for the congregation. We want to be able to enjoy and participate and be a part and feel like we are a part of the congregation and have that experience. Secondly, as this redesign, this is something that's very important to me, and I think about it every time I come to the service, is if there's an assault on this church, have we contemplated safety measures that we want to add when we're doing this redesign? Egress. These are all things, if we're going to do this redesign, we need to really think about these kinds of things. I'd hate for us to do something and then run into a situation where people are struggling to get out of this sanctuary because of egress issues.
I mean, those are both Mary and David. Those are great points. That just on the egress one, I mean, basic compliance with fire code, we will have egress and sufficient. But these are all, even without the fire code, these are things that we need to take into account with the actual design. And the height issue is a real one. It was talked about just last week when they were talking about how the visual that was being shown, we still haven't worked that out. And to what extent that we can work it out with how high the lecterns need to be, or whatever, that needs to be worked out. It is trying to weigh when you make something accessible, what do you make not accessible? It's a balancing act, but it's one that's taken very seriously. You're not that height challenge. I'm not a tall guy. You do need to have people to be able to see, and the architects are aware of that, and that is, for this to be a successful campaign, we can't ignore those kinds of concerns, those kinds of issues, because the real vote will come when people say, I want to contribute to that, or I don't want to contribute to that. But we do, trying to be accessible to everyone, to be welcoming of everyone, no matter who they are, no matter what their physical situation is extremely important, and I think just woven into who we are as a community. And it's never quite perfect. It certainly isn't now in terms of accessibility, and we can make it more so. It's a long ways of saying, yes, those are, I'm not discounting those. Those will be part of a design process which people will be involved in. Is that Devin? Who? Oh, back here. John?
Yeah, I would like to kind of follow a little
John,
bit.
this is John Ward.
I'd like to follow a little bit on what David said about ideas and vision of what we could do with the congregation and the sanctuary here. Has there been any thought about adding in additional audiovisual cues? I have a vision. I would love to see, with like an organ or something, video playing up on the screen, or some way to introduce not just a small little video, display that we could see, but somehow add in some technology to what we're doing. I would love to have a finally built out proposal that has all the details, all the costs, that we could look at, the heights, everything else, and approve. But I don't have anything. I really would like to see it. But I do appreciate the additional information we have tonight, and that's been great. But I really would love a detailed proposal.
We really can't get to, I mean, there's always more information needed, but we will need to spend some money to get to that level of detail, and that's why we're asking for approval at this point, knowing that we're going to have to come back for people to be willing to give to this campaign. Dwight?
Scott, Dwight Hildman. Donnie, Devin, do we have a horizon?
What?
Do we have any speculation about how long a capital campaign would take and where we would be in a design?
The idea is that it would be the first part of April. Well, we would start immediately if it were approved tonight on the putting together the kind of information that John was talking about. But the campaign, the public-facing campaign, would start roughly the first week of April and go through middle to late May. It'd be a relatively short campaign, but of course the pledges would be for 3 years. So we would have a lot more information before that started in the first part of April.
Hi, Mark Osborne. Two things I wanted to mention. One is during the summers, we spend our summer in Oregon. We're heathens. Occasionally we go to a Presbyterian church where we live, and they have a short place for the ministerial team, but they do have big screens on both sides that actually show what's going on up there for everybody. So it's actually easy to see what's going on up there if you're short, which a lot of people are. I was born taller. My second question is one, I played the piano when I was in grade school. I wasn't very good. But most churches nowadays, new churches and updating churches, I understand what Joanna said, are putting in electronic digital organs rather than updating their pipe organs. They claim, of course, that the sound is every bit as good. Have we looked at the difference in cost between those, and has that been something that's been discussed? I assume it has. Kim, you probably discussed it more than anybody.
The organ committee early on decided we did not want to go that route. Plymouth has always had a pipe organ. When this building was built, a pipe organ was installed in this building. This is the third organ. There's a huge difference between a pipe organ and an electronic instrument. The sound coming through speakers is totally different than a pipe organ that fills the space. Pipe organ is a living, breathing instrument, and it just supports voices much better than an electronic does. So we have not compared costs at all. So.
Yes, I'm Susan McCarthy, and I wanted to speak to David's point about accessibility. One thing I wanted to point out is that there has been a major change to the sanctuary that occurred when the sanctuary was last remodeled in 1990. And that is that there used to be one primary exit door at the back of the sanctuary. It's right in the middle now, blocked by a piece of furniture. That was the only exit other than the one on the north and the one on the south. And now you look back and we have two main exit doors, which helps a lot with getting people out of the sanctuary. And you can't even tell that those other two doors were not original. So that's just an example of how we have improved accessibility in and out of the sanctuary. And it also shows you an example of how we can preserve the beauty of this sanctuary with, at the same time of making a very necessary change.
Thank you, Susan.
Hello, I'm James Jordan. People have been talking about the design, you know, height. I understand that we're like seeking permission to start a capital campaign. When it comes to the actual design, will the congregation like vote on that? I just don't know procedurally, or maybe I'm just curious.
I don't think it will be a collective decision. To be honest with you, I don't know what we would do. I think a lot of governing this church is kind of reading the church and figuring out when the congregation, there's enough concerns, enough questions that you go to the congregation. It clearly will be presented to the congregation and get feedback from it. At some point, you've got to have, I think, a group make the decision, but honestly, that hasn't been decided. What level of involvement the entire congregation would have on specific design principles.
Ron Johnson. Excuse me. I've understood Doug correctly that at the present time we don't know for sure that the Kansas Historical Society will let us alter anything here in the sanctuary. Did I understand that correct, Doug?
We have not submitted an application, so we've not had an official ruling from them, but I would say in general, looking at the principles and guidance, what we're proposing should fit within their guidelines, and we should get approval. But once we have a tighter design, then we can submit and confirm, and we'll definitely make sure we do that before we move forward with the full project.
Back here.
Jackie Lord. I keep hearing that we're voting on an initial expenditure, but nobody's mentioned how much that initial expenditure is going to be. So that's my question.
What is the contract? 40?
So if we decide to go ahead with the capital campaign, we will hire a consultant, and that cost will be $40,000. And then I do believe that there will be it might be that then we get our first lead gift and we don't have any other costs that we need to front. But I would certainly want to have some flexibility for $5,000 or $10,000 of clerical cost or, printing cost or something if we needed that in order to further the campaign. So I'm going to say $50,000 just to catch it.
May I call the question, please?
The question has been called. We will move straight to a vote. What? The question's been called. I'm sorry, I actually can't see. Who? What? Devin is telling you right now. Okay. So do we have it? The name? Yeah, okay. So the question has been called. That's not a debatable question, right? Parliamentarian, we go straight to the vote. You have a point of, John, what's your question? John would like it to be a tallied vote by which you're talking about a paper ballot? Okay, the chair rules against that. I'm going to rule that we're going to go to a voice vote, and if we need be, if we can't tell if there's a division, we'll go to a show of hands. That's the ruling of the chair. We will go to a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. No? Wait, is there another question? Okay, we'll do that again. I want to make sure, I'm not trying to, what? Okay.
It was
wait,
my
wait a
motion.
minute. Get the mic.
Sorry, Mom didn't train me as well as she probably hoped she did as a parliamentarian. But can you please just explain a little bit about what happens with the vote to call the question? What exactly are we voting on, and what is required for further discussion to go forward?
Mark, do you want to handle that? Get on the mic.
So the chair would make this ruling about how to proceed, but I think on a motion to call the question, there ought to be a second, and then you're going to vote on whether or not to call the question.
Okay.
If that passes, then you're voting on the motion to approve the project. If the motion to call the question fails, then debate would continue.
Right.
Is my view.
Okay, I should have clarified that. Yeah, what the vote, thank you. I think that's what. So the point, what Mark Simpson, our parliamentarian, is that I need a second for the call of the question. Is there a second? Who wants to put their name on it? You're closest. Okay, we have a second. We'll now go to the vote, which is the vote to whether to vote. This isn't the vote, this is whether to vote. Okay. I'm not, okay. It's a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The vote passes, so we will go to the vote on the question. The question is the motion that is up there on the agenda. You've got it on the agenda in your paper, and it's also up on the screen. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The chair rules that the ayes have it. So with that, we have passed this. I will say that I thank you all. There is so much more work to go. There are lots of details. Your questions are welcome. We need them to have a successful campaign. But you guys are amazing. You brave the weather. And with that, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
By Devin. Is there a second? I'm just doing it so nobody comes. I'll take John Becker's just seconded. All in favor, say aye. Thank you.